Next up on Pax Americana. The United Terran ship, the Carpathian, launches to thunderous applause. Despite the delays being caused from the serious shortages of key trans-Newtonian elements, which are needed to build the advanced systems of the class, the government has still laid claim that it plans to build 10 of these new cruisers for the 2000s fleet, a target many analysts doubt is possible. With production output declining, the government has begun a program to increase mining output and expansion across the board. The president stated that no rock would go unturned and every available resource within grasp would be exploited. Protests outside Nelson military base due to poor quality of life lead to 39 dead. The military police believed to be responsible, the governor of the moon denies all responsibility. This has led to more protests and more anger from the populace. It's expected that the president will arrive shortly to the moon. Hello and welcome back to episode 17, I believe it is anyway, of Aurora 4X Pax Americana. You may be wondering where I have been. Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? I had injured myself quite severely, dislocating my shoulder for multitude of reasons, which you will be able to find out if you go on the Discord. But suffice it to say, I was in a sling and not feeling great for quite a bit of time. This, unfortunately, has been for about 3 weeks now, and I just now feel ready to get back into making content. Wouldn't recommend dislocating your shoulder, by the way, not a fun experience. But let's get into another not fun experience, which is Aurora 4X. What I mean by that is our Gallicite shortages. We're currently facing severe shortages across the board for Gallicite, and we're trying to locate more and more resources. So this episode, we're going to be kind of toning it down. It's more of a chill, get back into the swing of things. We're just managing our economy, and we're really growing our bureaucracy, just the industry in general. You know, one of the things I think when we get into Aurora, and we get into games like this, is just how complex it all gets. You know, even me, who's played Aurora since 2020, so for 3 years straight, made multiple series on it, I get overwhelmed by the amount that I have to do. And it doesn't help that I insist on setting up patrols, having ships moved here, replacing old ships, having building plans for new ships, you know, sorting out ground forces. It's all these different things that you have to do to keep yourself going. Another thing that I want to address as well is the alien races. So, as we've been having in recent times, we've been dealing with slowdown, and this slowdown is caused by these alien races. Now, if you are a purveyor of the Aurora 4X main Discord, you may have come across the bug or the knowledge of a bug which causes non-player races to not be connected to your galaxy. So, essentially, how it works in Aurora is you generate a galaxy or a universe, and in that universe or in that galaxy, each of the NPRs are generated a certain distance away from you if you start with non-player races, which we have in this campaign. They will then explore and eventually find you, and you will eventually find them. That is supposedly that's what's supposed to happen. But because of some bugs in 2.11, it's unlikely that this will actually occur. Suffice it to say, this can be remedied. However, what this will likely mean is I will need to either manually connect these points, which is possible, by going into these NPRs and doing it through their perspective, or I will need to delete those NPRs and generate new ones. Based on my observations of looking in the behind the scenes of the save, the NPRs are fighting. They're not fighting each other, but they are fighting the raiders which we have come across. These raiders are, of course, causing this slowdown, and it's something that I could pretty easily remedy. You can delete these races immediately and all their ships will be disappeared. However, this of course does make it a lot less interesting. I want to fight developed, capable alien empires, not one system alien empires that you have to deal with. So what I may do, and I think, might be a good idea, is I might do some fine dangling behind the scenes and generate some other systems and generate NPRs and leave them there, can make sure they are connected to our universe, leave them there, and then eventually fight them later on or explore them in a more organic way so that I don't know exactly what's going on. Now, what's happening on screen, I was moving around ground forces. We are moving over additional surface-to-air weapons that we got, the new ones, the new laser arrays. We're moving those over to Yorktown for its defense because we lack any kind of ground deployment. Something that you may have noticed, of course, is our lack of ground force replacements. A lot of our ground forces, of course, are 20 years old at this point. They've been serving out their time, and we have a limited ground force contingent. This is something that I want to remedy. However, it's going to, of course, cost us a lot of resources to do. Luckily, most of that's going to be in Verenderite. But mostly, it's going to be time and technological development. And so what I'm waiting on in terms of that is specifically boarding. As you can see, we are actually at 500 Gallicite left, and maintenance supplies are running out, because every time we build a ship, every time a ship resupplies, it uses maintenance supplies. And what our biggest thing is we're actually transporting too many supplies out. Because we can't produce maintenance supplies as normally as we would regularly, we are having an issue where our maintenance transport fleets are moving way too many supplies around the place, and this is causing a severe shortage in what we will need. Now, when we're expanding a navy, that's kind of a problem. Keep in mind we have like 7 carriers in service, and only 2 of them are actually in field. Maybe only 1. And the rest are sitting above Earth, so are a bunch of frigates, a bunch of destroyers, and a bunch of other ships which we are continually building. We're also awaiting our new 60,000 ton carrier, and that's not going to be a small thing in terms of our maintenance capability. So I was looking at potentially research that could improve our efficiency for maintenance facilities, because the less maintenance facilities we need to maintain ships means the less Gallicite, the less uranium and uridium we need to spend to maintain the ships they are maintaining. We're also looking to expand out our mining in the 61 Cygni system. Despite it only being the second most populated non-solar system, it is a massive hub for mining. It is a vital area, and it's why I am going to be positioning, which we'll finish up later in the episode, our cruiser, the UTS Carpathian, and we'll be deploying the Carpathian to 61 Cygni. A cruiser should be able to defend itself against any Nort fleet that we have seen so far, and has enough missiles and capability to do so. A big side effect, however, of our missile shortages, or not missile shortages, but our Gallicite shortages, is missile shortages. We have been developing new technologies for new missiles. These new missiles will need to replace old missiles. These old missiles, of course, are not as effectual. So that costs Gallicite. To build missiles costs tritanium and Gallicite and fuel. These are all resources which are an issue to obtain. The good news, however, is on the fuel front, we are actually doing excellently. Earth is now over 100 million litres of fuel, at least it should be, and we are making a lot of fuel. So my prioritization to remedy our situation there has actually proved to be a smashing success. And thankfully, when our sodium stockpiles are also doing pretty well for ourselves. We're mining relatively quite a lot of resources. The problem is our expenditures are just extremely high, and what we may need to do is just scale everything back. Our economy isn't really growing so far as we are stagnating in terms of that. We are building financial centers, we are building other things, but we are building additional construction factories because why build additional construction factories we can't actually make use of them? I also later on here, I'm going to be building auto mines, and those auto mines are going to be needed for expanding our mining efforts, of course. I always say, auto mines are less efficient. They take longer to get their return back on investment, but you need to think about it as a transactional thing. You are trading corundium for Gallicite, essentially, and other resources. And that's 100% worthwhile, in my opinion, because Gallicite is what feeds the Empire. Every engine, every missile, every piece of maintenance supply needs Gallicite. And that is the lifeblood. It's not fuel, it's not uranium, it's not any of that, it's Gallicite. And obtaining new sources of Gallicite is of paramount importance. And we'll get to why that is likely going to justify our invasion of Bernard's Star. Aliens, which are in Bernard's Star, are precursors. If you don't know what they are a robotic race of people, or, well, not really people, but robotic alien race, who sit in the system and, do their thing, so to speak. Due to the size of the enemy fleet, we have not yet attempted to oust them from the area. They are only one jump away from Sol. In fact, we could go from Sol to them immediately. This does shorten logistics headroom significantly for us if we do plan our attack. However, the biggest problem, which we are going to be dealing with, is the fact they have 60 plus ships. But that could be also our biggest boon. If they have so many ships, it's likely the world they are guarding is of vitally rich and massive significance. So my priority is getting our navy into a place where we'll be able to actually fight that. They have 60 plus ships, sure, but if we have 10 carriers, cruisers, destroyers and frigates, I feel we can unload enough ordnance into an enemy force that we will be able to deplete them. However, to do that we need Gallicite, because Gallicite is needed to build missiles. We need missiles on massive quantities to actually be able to penetrate and destroy those enemy ships. A full frontal engagement of beam weapon ships is unlikely to prove successful. That many number of large combatants is difficult to say the least to beat. However, with given enough missile fire and given enough time, and with 10 carriers and hundreds of fighters firing missiles and cruisers and frigates and destroyers, we can crack that shell. It's going to be tough, but we can crack it. And then once we have, Bernard Starr will lead the way open. There also comes the idea of what happens once we destroy the enemy fleet. If we destroy the enemy fleet, what will we have to invade the planet with? And this is a problem which we have to consider. Yes, we can destroy the fleet, sure. But if we can't take the planet, then we can't access the resources that we need. We could bomb the world, and that would be fairly useful. However, that would also ruin the planet and probably destroy the installations there, aka the ruins. And that's really not an efficient way of spending our lives with our crew members. So we're going to have to build a ground invasion force. That ground invasion force is going to have to be hundreds of thousands of tons of forces. And what we're going to need for that is heavy shock troops. You see on the screen here, I'm looking at our planned evolution from our light carriers, and that is the CVAX and the TAC, the Transport Assault Carrier and the Assault Carrier. The purpose of these is to provide drops of elite troops while also supporting them at fleet capable speeds and with fighter defenses or boarding capability. I want to board some alien ships. I want to take those ships and I want to make them ours. To do that, we need capability of boarding vessels, but we also need marines capable of doing so. So what I will be researching is heavy powered infantry armor and boarding combat capability once our boarding troop transport capability is done, and that will allow us to begin that process of boarding. Because aliens likely are not going to go down without a fight if we board those ships, and especially if we board some of the bigger ones. I want those 30,000 ton battleships boarded and taken for the United Terran States. Think of the technology we could obtain from them, and think of all those resources we can salvage and scrap and use to build new vessels. But that's just the ambition of me. In reality, at the moment, we are kind of just waiting and hoping for terraforming and resource collection and mining rates to increase. You know, your bog standard sci-fi mineral stuff, the thing that you need to keep everything going. And so our actual, you know, grand design to take that system isn't going to happen for quite a bit of time. We're also continuing to explore. Currently, we only have 2 exploration ships available. We are building additional exploration ships, but of course, just like every other bloody ship, it's being hung up by Gallicite resources because every ship requires Gallicite for its engines, and last I checked, every ship has an engine. Or multiple, even. But the Beta Hydri and the Chiorianus have continued their work and are continuing to explore. So far, they haven't encountered any actual threats to them, and so, generally speaking, they are doing their duty pretty well. As you can see here, these asteroids are proving very, very good for us. mining 10,000 tons of resources per annum, and we are going through these asteroids more and more and more so. That's why asteroids are really good. Their high accessibility means you can mine those resources quickly, extract them, get them to a base, get them flown back to Earth, and safely deposited to be churned into a battleship or a carrier. But that's only one system, and it's really the linchpin of our entire empire is that one system. We need to diversify, we need to expand to new systems, and we need more resources. Our two primary areas for that is Struve 2398 and also 109 Aquarii. Both of them have planets with resource-rich capabilities that we can extract and then diversify our resources to bring back to Earth. We're also discovering additional systems. We discovered the system of AD Leonis, a relatively barren system with nothing of particular note. And we are now on June 17th, 2001, or June 21st, as we can see here. Our economic racial wealth situation has been increasing as we've been building financial centers. We ship them over to Mars, and Mars slowly grows itself. Humanity now sits at just probably over 3 billion people living and breathing, and spread out throughout the galaxy now as we begin to go further and further out. Terra Nova now has 36 million people, and with that many people, it has the ability to house many, many mines. We also have been finishing up our refits of the Aberdeen Block 2s. These are the much more fuel efficient, twice as fuel efficient ships, with twice as less fuel, which means that they have the same range, but they are a much smaller burden on our fuel supply chain. These ships have finished up their refits, their automatic refits, and they will now be assembled together to create a flotilla to be moving mines to Terra Nova. Because the colony cost is low, we've got such a large population, we have a massive workforce available there, which will mine the uranium and Gallicite reserves on the planet. We're also moving over additional terraformers to Europa. Europa we're terraforming quite quickly because Europa is such a small moon relative to a big planet that we've been terraforming in other places. We can terraform it quite quickly, and that quick terraforming can hopefully get Europa to a point where we can put a lot of mines on it and start shipping those resources in system. Because it's in system in terms of in the solar system near Earth, we don't need to use freighters to move resources, which saves on fuel massively. So again, the fuel has really not become less of an issue for us as we've been mining more and more and more thorium across the galaxy, as well as just more fuel in general. We're also still building comets and more STOs, lots and lots of comets. We have 183 of them now built, and we still have all of those old fighters which we will need to take away, scrap, move out. Old stuff that is not going to be useful anymore. So that's the old F4s, or the F4s, the F8As, which are still in service, generally speaking, across the board. As you can see, the game is quite slow now. Remember, this is all at 2x speed. So when you see a 5-day increment taking 5 seconds, that's 10 seconds really. It takes quite a bit of time to do so. And it's something that I need, I want to probably fix, and it's probably going to require some tinkering in the background. But you can see here, we actually are changing Europa's atmosphere massively. 0.22 atmospheres per year. So that means that we can add basically an Earth's worth of pressure every 4 years, almost. And that pressure is going to be very, very important because we need to basically just dump a crap ton of Artesium on the world, which will warm the planet up, or more succinctly, will block the sun out enough that will warm the planet below, creating a greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect kind of named for that process, right? Why does carbon dioxide heat up the planet? Because it gets trapped in our atmosphere, trapped in the upper echelons of our atmosphere, and it blocks out the sun and keeps the heat in. And by keeping the heat in, you see a increase in temperature across the board relative to what it was without the carbon dioxide. In this case, we're just dumping crap loads of Artesium on the world, which does the same purpose, but doesn't choke people to death. So, there's a give or take there. But we are looking to be in 2002, and we're actually getting up. Think about it now, we're only 21 years away from 2023. And this timeline is a lot different, so to say the least. We're nearly coming up to the 30th anniversary of the exodus of the diaspora from Earth and off into the galaxy. Resources are coming in though, and by the end of the episode, we will see a marked change in Gallicite stockpiles, as in it's going better. Our freighters are moving thousands of tons of resources, and thankfully, they're moving about 4,000 tons of Gallicite every single cycle. This Gallicite is of paramount importance. Without it, again, we will not be able to do anything. Some people may also call for a reduction in the size of the Navy, and I think, in the ways they're correct. We need to reduce the size of the Navy to a point that is much more manageable, and getting rid of older carriers may be that way. How useful is a light carrier that can only carry 21 fighters? Not really. It's useful in terms of maybe power projection for small frontier colonies and protecting, shipping lanes, but in terms of actual fleet combat, relatively speaking, it provides very little actual capability. This is why we are building larger carriers. We're going to need several 60,000 carriers. I think someone left a message because I remember making a comment about building a carrier for every continent on Earth. And I said 5 carriers. And they're like, well, what about Australia and Antarctica? And I can't slip my mind. And I guess I think I lumped Australia into Asia, and I lumped. I said, what's Antarctica? Well, Antarctica doesn't need a fucking carrier, right? So I think the more distinct point is because we're RPing as Space America. Every ship needs to be built for a constituency, in the constituency. And when we're talking about continents, and for defending those continents, it makes sense. So we're going to be going for the UTS North America, the UTS South America, the UTS Europa, the UTS Africa, the UTS Asia, and then we might do an Australia, but doubt it. Just because Australia is a continent. Most people don't see it as a continent. But it's very unpopulated and not really the same as other continents. So I think 5 is going to be enough, and also because, guys, do you want me to break the bank even more than I'm doing so now? I'm rapidly producing more and more ships when I'm in a fucking Gallicite deficit, and you want me to build 7 super carriers instead of 5 super carriers? I mean, they're not like super, they're like big carriers. You know how much those things cost me? Like, one of those shipments, one of those bloody transported shipments you see... I'm in a transport fleet that we're transporting. One of those shipments builds 1 carrier. Okay? 1 carrier. And that takes like a year to gather. Okay? One of those shipments. So we need like 5 additional shipments. And that doesn't count all the other things we need to build for them, like the maintenance supplies, and missiles, and fighters. The fighters are bloody expensive because guess what? When you take a fighter, super boost the engine, and then send that into combat, that costs a lot of Gallicite. Gallicite, which we don't have. And as you can see here, we're now facing shortages. So what do we have to do? We have to pause production across the board. Similarly, you can't pause production of all ships at once, which I'm going to suggest that. It's really annoying. But, what can you do? So we have to pause them one at a time because Steve loves inferring into myself RSI as if I've not already been punished enough with my dislocated shoulder. To be clear, it's not dislocated anymore. they fixed that on the day. But it's punishment enough to deal with the RSI. Because I remember I think it was the first Uncut series. We did a carrier series again, and because we didn't have squadron mechanics back then, like we do now, the RSI for doing fighters, because it was only detach and subfleet mechanics, I think at the end of that, I never wanted to play carriers again. But Steve listened. Steve, the ever wonderful, made an AAR about Battlestar Galactica, and made some mechanics that made it slightly less painful for everyone involved, including my wrists, my brain, and everyone else who loves carriers because hoorah, United States, NATO. So yeah. But really, if you're just looking for the minimal amount of micro, just build a bunch of battleships with a ton of armor, get a bunch of lasers, and that's basically the German series I did. That is like, yeah, that's like least micro. You just send those boys in and you just murder everything at range. Just shoot down missiles and stuff like that. Speaking of, I cannot wait for the 2.0 release. Not 2.0, the 2.2 release. The 2.2 release is going to have the new PD mechanics, or point defense mechanics, and that is going to be a massive boon for just enjoyment in terms of combat, in terms of flexibility, in terms of what you fit on ships and stuff like that. It's going to include things like chaff and decoys and missile decoys and laser pumped warheads and all sorts of fun stuff and a bunch of point defense mechanics which I can't really get into. Changes to the electronic warfare systems and make them more complex, more interesting, and more dedicated, and all that stuff. But that's enough of our dreams when that will be released in the year 2045. This is what we're doing in game, which is basically shuffling things around, tugging things around, mining additional resources, and we're now on the 204th comet. I think I ordered the construction of 256 total. We are probably going to need more, and we're also probably going to need a more of the F-12s, not the F-12, F-120s, instead of the F-80s. The F-80s being the Comets, and the F-120s being the Hawks. Hawk? Yes, I think that was the Hawk. But yeah, the F-80 Comets. I like the Comet name as well. Like the F-80, obviously, in our timeline, that was essentially the name of the P-80. It was called the XF-80 before it was dubbed P-80 because of the naming schemes back then. But the P-80 was a sexy aircraft. I love it. You can find it in Fallout games and all sorts. It was the quintessential late 40s, early 50s United States jet fighter, the first American jet fighter. Basically that equivalent of the Meteor, much better than the Meteor. At least especially the earlier versions of the Meteor, which were honestly god awful. In terms of flight performance, and just so that's Comet kind of very similar to the name of what it was called, which was the P-80 Shooting Star. So I guess Comet is a bit like a shooting star, though I think that's what you call it, a meteor or meteoroid. It's different names for when they are in the atmosphere and when they're coming down or when they land or whatever. Well, not land, but blow a piece of molten rock into the planet's surface. But we do finish up the UCS Carpathian, which I talked about earlier. The UCS Carpathian is our beautiful 17,500-ton ship, the largest non-carrier ship that we have. It has a dedicated anti-missile missile system. It also has 72 tubes carrying the SIM-8C missiles. 72 of them in total, 270 anti-missile missiles or missile interception missile. And those missiles provide a great net of both defense and offense, and each of our big carriers, our 6,000-ton carriers, will have one or two Carpathians with each of the fleet. The purpose of which is to provide defensive fire, missiles fire support, and just a sensor net over the area. They can also act as fleet or squadron leaders, and that's often where they will be serviced. So for its first, voyage or bon voyage out into the wider galaxy, I'm going to send the Carpathian to New Eden with the purposes of defending our assets there. It will then be able to train up and do all that kind of stuff while also ensuring defense, because we don't have a carrier in the area, so we'll send over a cruiser, and that cruiser can ensure the defense of our orbital mining platforms you can see set up nearer to the star. So I'm glad that the Carpathian's done. We're not going to build its sister just yet. I think we do actually build its sister. Her sister is going to be the Etna, so the UCS Etna. And then we're going to probably build 10 of them, 10 of the cruisers. We're going to build 5 carriers. We're going to need 10 of the cruisers, and it's going to be a whole other thing. And we still have to replace all those frigates, and we have to replace the destroyers, and we have to build this, and we have to do that, and we have to build more corvettes, and it's a whole bloody mess of a lot of different stuff that we have to do. I'm sure many of you just listen to this as kind of like the mad ramblings of an Aurora nerd, and you know, that's essentially what this is. I doubt many of you actually look at the screen, because I've turned, obviously, speaking after the fact, this has turned into more like a fucking podcast where I just discuss, like, you know, oh, Empire did this, or we did this, and, you know, this. If you guys do enjoy that, I mean, I guess that's why you're here, right? Then gives you some ideas, gives you some background noise while you play your own Aurora sessions. And you know, let me know how your game's going. By the way, let me know how you're faring things. Do you play Aurora? Do you not? Do you enjoy what your current campaign? Are you looking forward to 2.2? You know, all that good stuff. But that's where I'll leave us off, and I'll see you guys in the next episode, episode 18. Thank you for watching. If you want to help me become a member or like and subscribe, it really does help me out. Goodbye.